There are goals. And then there are moments that stop time. Most footballers spend their entire careers chasing one instant. One flash of brilliance that will outlive them. That will be replayed long after their boots are hung up, long after their names fade from the back pages. Most never find it. One man found it twice. In the same match. For minutes apart. June 22nd, 1986. Estadio Azteca, Mexico City. A World Cup quarterfinal. Argentina against England. And a 25-year-old from the slums of Buenos Aires who was about to remind the world that football isn't just a sport. It's memory, it's politics, it's rage, and it's art, all compressed into 90 minutes and 11 men. This is the story of Diego Armando Maradona and how one goal, not even his most famous one, changed the way an entire sport would be understood forever. To understand why this goal mattered, you have to understand what came before it. For years earlier, in 1982, Britain and Argentina had gone to actual war. Not a metaphorical one. Not a rivalry dressed up in dramatic language for television. A real war, fought over a group of islands in the South Atlantic that the British called the Falklands and the Argentines called Las Malvinas. Hundreds of young men died. Ships sank. Families were shattered on both sides of the ocean. So when the draw for the 1986 World Cup put Argentina against England in the quarterfinals, nobody pretended this was just a football match. Not the players, not the press, not the millions watching in bars, in living rooms, in city squares from Buenos Aires to Birmingham. Maradona himself would later say that going into that match, they weren't just playing for a place in the semifinal. They were playing, in his mind, for something closer to national dignity. A way to answer a defeat that had nothing to do with football with something that had everything to do with pride. That's the pressure sitting on his shoulders as he walked out onto the Azteca pitch. Not just a World Cup quarterfinal. A referendum on a wound that hadn't healed. 6 minutes into the second half, the score still level at 0-0, Maradona received the ball on the edge of the box, tried to thread a pass, lost it to an English defender, and in the scramble that followed, the ball looped up into the air. What happened next would be dissected for decades. Maradona rose. English goalkeeper Peter Shilton rose with him. And somehow, impossibly, the smaller man, a man giving away nearly half a foot in height, got there first. The ball crossed the line. Argentina led. The English players erupted in protest immediately. They knew. Shilton knew. Half the stadium knew. But the referee, a Tunisian official named Ali bin Nasser, was screened from the clearest angle, and his linesman offered no correction. The goal stood. Maradona would later describe it, half joking, half defiant, as being scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. That phrase, the hand of God, didn't just become a headline. It became a permanent fixture in the language of football itself. Even people who have never watched a single match know those 3 words. That's not an accident. That's the power of a moment so audacious, so brazen, that it transcended the sport and became folklore. But here's the thing. If that had been the only goal of the match, Maradona would be remembered today primarily as a cheat. A brilliant one, maybe, but a cheat all the same. History needed a second act to turn him into a legend instead of a villain. He delivered it 4 minutes later. Maradona picked up the ball inside his own half, nearly on the halfway line, with his back to the English goal. He turned, and then he simply began to run. What follows is 60 yards of football that has never been matched, not before and not since. Not for its speed alone, and not for its skill alone, but for the terrifying combination of both, executed under the heaviest pressure the sport can offer, on the biggest stage the sport can provide. He beat one England midfielder with a single touch. He beat a second with a subtle change of pace that left the man grasping at nothing but air. He surged past a third defender near the edge of the box. Peter Shilton came off his line to close the angle, and Maradona simply shifted his balance, let the goalkeeper commit, and slid the ball past him and into the net. 5 English players touched him or tried to touch him. None of them touched the ball. The Azteca exploded. And somewhere in a commentary booth, an Argentine broadcaster named Victor Hugo Morales delivered a piece of commentary so raw, so emotional, so unfiltered in its joy that it has become nearly as legendary as the goal itself. A man losing his composure completely, screaming, weeping into his microphone, unable to find words fast enough to keep pace with what his eyes were seeing. Years later, FIFA would run a poll asking football fans and experts around the world to vote for the greatest goal in the history of the World Cup. This one won. Not narrowly, not controversially. It won because there was, in the eyes of almost everyone who has ever studied the sport, simply nothing else like it. Now here's where we need to slow down and ask the real question this video is built around. Not what happened. Everybody already half knows what happened. The real question is, why did these 4 minutes matter more than almost any other passage of play in the history of the game? First, it redefined what a single player could mean to a team. Football, more than almost any other major sport, is supposed to be collective. 11 players, constant motion, distributed responsibility. But Maradona's second goal proved that one man, on one afternoon, could simply decide the outcome of a match through individual will alone. Coaches had always preached system, structure, shape. Maradona proved that genius could override all of it. That idea, the talismanic individual capable of single-handedly winning a knockout match against a good team, became a permanent part of how scouts, coaches, and fans evaluate players to this day. Every time someone says a player can win a game on his own, they are, whether they know it or not, speaking in a language Maradona wrote. Second, it collapsed the line between football and morality. The hand of God goal forced the sport to reckon with a question it had mostly avoided. What happens when brilliance and dishonesty arrive in the same 60 seconds? Referees didn't have video review in 1986. There was no VAR, no goal line technology, no stoppage for review. The goal stood because a human being made a human mistake, and that mistake became permanent. This single incident is one of the biggest reasons the sport eventually built the technological safety nets it uses today. Every time you watch a controversial goal get overturned by a video assistant referee in a modern match, you are watching an institutional memory of the hand of God still shaping the rules of the game, nearly 4 decades later. Third, it turned a football match into a piece of geopolitical theater. Because of the shadow of the war just 4 years prior, this match was never just about advancing to a semifinal. Maradona understood that, and he leaned into it. In doing so, he demonstrated something that has never left the sport since: that football can function as a substitute battlefield, a place where national tension gets expressed, absorbed, and occasionally healed through 90 minutes of controlled conflict. Every major geopolitical rivalry that plays out on a football pitch today, and there are many, owes something to the template set on that afternoon in Mexico City. Fourth, it created the modern archetype of the flawed genius. Before this match, sports storytelling tended to prefer clean narratives. Heroes were heroes. Villains were villains. Maradona, in the space of 4 minutes, made that binary impossible to sustain. He cheated brilliantly, unapologetically, and then, immediately afterward, he produced a piece of skill so pure that it silenced almost all criticism. This combination, genius wrapped around flaw, brilliance inseparable from controversy, became the lens through which we now understand almost every great, complicated athlete who came after him. When we talk about later superstars whose personal lives or ethics were complicated but whose talent was undeniable, we are, in a sense, still talking about the template Maradona built in 1986. Argentina beat England 2-1 that day. They went on to beat Belgium in the semifinal, with Maradona scoring 2 more goals that, on any other day, in any other tournament, might themselves be remembered as goals of the century. Then they beat West Germany in the final. Maradona lifted the World Cup, and Argentina, a country still processing the wounds of war and years of brutal internal political turmoil, found something to celebrate in the streets that had nothing to do with grief. Peter Shilton never fully let go of the injustice of that first goal. English fans never forgot it either. For years, the mention of Maradona's name in England came wrapped in genuine resentment. But even his fiercest English critics, when pressed, would almost always admit the same thing in the same breath. The second goal was one of the greatest things they had ever seen a human being do with a football. That tension, resentment, and admiration occupying the same sentence is exactly why this moment endures. It refuses to simplify. It refuses to resolve into a clean story with a clean moral. And because it refuses to resolve, we are still talking about it. We are still building documentaries around it. we are still measuring modern greatness against it, nearly 40 years later. Football has produced thousands of great goals since that afternoon in Mexico City. Faster ones, more technically complex ones. Goals scored in bigger stadiums, in front of bigger television audiences, with better cameras capturing every angle. But almost none of them changed what the sport meant. One goal, scored with a fist disguised as a header, forced football to confront its own fallibility and eventually rebuild its rules around the possibility of human error. And 4 minutes later, a second goal, scored with nothing but speed, balance, and impossible courage, gave the world a permanent answer to the question of what a single human being is capable of on a football pitch. That's not just a goal. That's history, rewritten in real time, by one man, on one Wednesday afternoon, in front of the entire watching world. And that's why, decades later, we're still talking about it.